Welcome back to Christian Questions on News Talk 104.7 WXLM. Our subject this morning, does the Bible have integrity? To be a part of our program, call 860-442-9956. That's 442-WXLM.
And Jonathan, I am here in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. I have Jim Parkinson and Len Grice with me as our two guests this morning to discuss, I think, a very fascinating subject. And our question, does the Bible have integrity? Remember, integrity, one of the definitions is an unimpaired condition. And I think that's an important concept to look at in terms of the Scriptures. Is the Bible really authentic? Is it really something you can actually count on as being correct? Or are we just looking at a bunch of different manuscripts and ideas that were put together by some people to manipulate society? So, Len, as we get back into this, who wrote the Bible? How long did it take?
Well, it was a long period of time. I think maybe I'd like to illustrate it with a story a friend of mine told me once. He said he went to an antique show, and he set up a table there because he wanted to share some of the gospel message with others that were there. And someone objected, came over to his table and said, you shouldn't be here with that. And he says, lady, if you can show me anything in this whole place that's older than this book right here, I'll pack up and be on my way.
So he got to stay, I presume.
Yeah. But I think that's the idea. The Bible was written over a long period of time, and we're constantly finding evidence of new treasures, the excavation, solid evidence today that we have over 40 authors that were writing over a period of several hundred years. Now, as that evidence comes through, whether it's through archaeology or it's through some of the clay tablets that are coming up, a lot of this is preserved by these writers over long periods of time. And the Old Testament, especially the Jewish Testament, is really preserved on a lot of clay tablets, on rocks. And long after these nations are passed away, there's a lot of independent testimony that we have as to some of these writings because they've been collected over time. The Bible itself is preserved not on stones, but in the writing. And as we find these copies over periods of time, we find more and more evidence that the Bible manuscripts that we're going to be talking about have been read, reread, they've been copied, recopied, and a lot of time along the way, everybody's been trying to exterminate those that are writing them. So if we look at a period of, what would you say, Jim, 1,400 years maybe?
Even more than that.
Yeah, more than that. We have, the collection being put together in the Scriptures, and no other book on this planet really has survived as long as the Bible in its whole.
All right, so, and that's an important point. We're looking at 1,600 years worth, looking at over 40 different individuals doing the writing, and yet somehow this collective body of work has survived. So, Jim, you read manuscripts, is that right?
Well, yes. In a word.
Yeah, well, he says yes. So we're talking about Greek and Hebrew and all this, and it kind of boggles my mind.
I won't profess to be a great expert in Hebrew and Greek. Am I that great an expert in English?
Well, first, before we get started asking you questions about manuscripts and how to understand them and how to determine what manuscripts are correct and so forth and so on, how did you get started with something like that?
That goes back almost half a century, but it was my first semester in graduate school, and I sat down to the lunch table and introduced myself to a fellow across the table that I didn't recognize, and he says, I'm Peter Parsons, and I'm from Oxford, England. And I say, fine, what are you studying here? He says, papyrology, and I says, what? Papyrology, the study of papyri, ancient papyrus manuscripts. I said, that's interesting, and thought quickly, tell me, does the university have any Bible papyri? He looked kind of strange, and he said, well, I guess you've come to the right place. It's got the largest collection in the Western Hemisphere and fourth or fifth largest in the whole world. I'm thinking, and I'm here? Was no intent of mine, but, if it gets put in your path, you either pick it up or step over it. in this case, I thought, well, not many people have this opportunity. I'll pick it up.
And so you spent almost the last 50 years doing a lot of investigating into manuscripts.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So let's take a few minutes now and let's talk about Bible manuscripts. I mean, when you say that, it sounds like such a simple thing, but that's an awfully large subject, isn't it?
Because the number of them especially.
Okay. What about Bible manuscripts? Tell us about them and tell us about your thoughts on finding those that are more authentic versus those that might not be.
Okay. The different manuscripts that you see are generally put into three different categories. One, if they're put on papyrus instead of vellum or parchment, same thing, that these manuscripts are given a letter P and then a superscript number. And then you have what's called the unfilled manuscripts, or majuscules. They're the block letter type from about the 4th century to the 10th century.
So block letter, that's kind of like printing.
It's a printing form.
Okay.
Yes, usually with broad lines. And those are given a little zero out in front of them, like 01, 02, 03, up to 0300, whatever, at the moment. And then we have those that are cursive or handwritten type, also on parchment or vellum. And those are given just ordinary numbers.
Okay. So you have, how many manuscripts are there?
Approximately 3,300 at the moment. We have a little over 100 of the papyrus manuscripts, which are generally much earlier than, certainly they're earlier than any of the cursive manuscripts. But once in a while you get one that's as late as maybe the 7th century. But the manuscripts we have from before the time of Constantine, say in the early 300s, and any before that are almost always papyrus.
Okay. Now, the King James Version of the Bible is known as the Common Version. And when was that written?
That was first in 1611,